Some names are etched forever in the collective memory and others are erased by time without anyone really knowing why. For years, dreaming of seeing an Argentine in the NBA was something so distant that we didn't even take it seriously. It was like imagining that a player from Bahia Blanca would face the gods of North American basketball, a fantasy that sounded nice but impossible. And yet one day, someone dared. Without cameras, without million-dollar contracts, without social media pushing his name. He arrived with a ball in his hand and a different mind. He wasn't the tallest, nor the fastest, nor the strongest, but he had something no one saw coming. He understood the game as if he had invented it. What he did wasn't a stroke of luck or a fairy tale. It was intelligence, obsession, and courage in a time when none of that was enough. A guy who didn't need to jump higher because he was already seeing further. And even so, time erased him. There are no jerseys with his name, no viral compilations of his plays, no documentaries doing him justice. Almost no one remembers that long before the heroes we all know, there was an Argentine who made it into the biggest league on the planet when simply dreaming about it was already madness. Today, his story seems like a myth lost among the archives. But if it weren't for him, maybe we never would have walked through that door. Because before the golden generation wrote its legend, there was someone who made it possible. The first one, the pioneer the world forgot. If Argentine basketball had a genetic map, Bahia Blanca would be the nucleus of its DNA. A city where courts blend with sidewalks and the sound of the bouncing ball is almost a daily soundtrack. It's no coincidence that the most intelligent, most technical, and most obsessive players in the country came from there. Bahia doesn't produce athletes, it produces minds. In the 90s, while the rest of the country watched soccer, Bahia breathed basketball. There were clubs in every neighborhood, coaches discussing tactics in cafes, and kids who grew up knowing that the right pass was worth more than a dunk. In that ecosystem, Juan Ignacio Sánchez was born, a kid with a different way of looking at the game. While others dreamed of scoring, he dreamed of understanding. Pepe grew up in a home where basketball wasn't a hobby, it was a way of thinking. His father Guillermo, also a coach, taught him to read the court as if it were a chessboard. By 12, he wasn't running after the ball anymore, he was directing it. And that obsession with order, with anticipating the play, became his trademark. In Bahia, everyone knew he had something special. He wasn't the most talented or the flashiest, but his mind was 2 plays ahead. The city shaped him as a player, but also as a person. Bahia teaches you that winning isn't enough if you don't understand why you win. That is its philosophy. The extra pass, respect for the system, collective reading. From there came Ginóbili, Montecchia, Espil, Palladino, and an entire generation that changed the way Argentina played basketball. And even though no one was talking about the NBA yet, something different was already in the air in Bahia. A silent, almost unconscious conviction that limits were mental. Pepe grew up in that environment where intelligence was a weapon, where tactics mattered more than physicality, and where a kid with obsession and a ball could dream of understanding the game better than anyone in the world. That was his laboratory. Bahia didn't prepare him for fame, it prepared him to think. And that mind, molded between old gyms and worn-out backboards, would be the one that ended up breaking the highest barrier that existed for an Argentine player. In the 90s, an Argentine playing in the NCCA was an absolute rarity. It was more likely to see a penguin in the Sahara than a kid from Bahia Blanca sharing a locker room with future NBA players. But Pepe Sánchez dared. At barely 20 years old, he packed his bags and went to the United States with a scholarship to play at Temple University, one of the toughest, most respected, and most demanding programs in college basketball. Temple wasn't a campus of sunshine and smiles, it was a factory of gladiators. The team was coached by John Chaney, a sideline legend, a man with a volcanic character obsessed with defense and discipline. Chaney was known for bringing out the best and the worst in his players. Training with him was like doing military service in basketball form, yelling, punishments, early mornings, and a system so demanding that more than one player broke down mentally. And there was Pepe, the only Latino without language, without contacts, without sponsors. A kid with an Argentine accent trying to survive in an environment where only 2 things mattered: defending and winning. The cultural shock was brutal. In the first months, he didn't understand the plays, didn't understand the jokes, and sometimes didn't even understand the orders, but he did understand the game, and that was what saved him. Chaney looked at him with suspicion until he started to notice something strange. That skinny kid who didn't jump or shoot spectacularly knew where the ball was going before the opponent passed it. He read offenses as if he had access to the script. In a league where everyone moved by instinct, Pepe played with logic. He was different. Little by little, he earned the respect of his teammates and of Chaney himself. The coach, famous for his defensive teams, found in Pepe the general he needed. He made him the starting point guard and gave him the keys to the team. Temple started winning, and the Argentine began to transform into something unprecedented: a foreigner commanding a U.S. college court. Basketball at Temple wasn't played, it was survived. And Pepe not only survived, he adapted, he imposed himself, and he began to stand out. In a world designed for dominant physicality, he entered with his mind. What Bahia had taught him, think before acting, became his superpower. That was his first great leap, crossing the language, the system, and the prejudice, proving that a kid from the south of the world could dominate the game with his mind. He wasn't a star yet, but he was already a symbol. He had conquered forbidden territory. What began as a curiosity turned into a phenomenon. At Temple, that quiet and cerebral Argentine went from being a rarity to becoming the soul of the team. By his junior year, he was no longer the foreign kid, he was the captain, the one who ordered, shouted, read, commanded, and dismantled opposing offenses as if he had a map of every play. His defense was insane. In an era when universities were obsessed with highlights, Pepe stole the ball. He stole everything. That's where his nickname was born, El Bandito. A nickname that at first sounded like a joke because of his Latin origin, because of that elegant and sly way he had of stripping the ball, but that later became a trademark. El Bandito was the terror of opposing point guards. He had quick hands, disciplined feet, and a precise reading of the game. He didn't need contact, he didn't need strength, he needed half a second of distraction to dismantle you. His ability to anticipate plays was sickening. In his most dominant season, he averaged more than 2 steals per game and ranked among the top 5 defenders in the entire NCAA. Temple became a fortress. Opponents said facing that team was like trying to open a safe while blindfolded, but Pepe didn't just defend, he thought he was the axis of the offensive system, the one who set the tempo, the one who organized every attack, the one who knew when to speed up and when to slow down. His basketball was surgical, without ornaments, without ego. If he could win with a pass, he didn't need to shoot. If he could save energy with an intelligent steal, he didn't run unnecessarily. He was a Swiss watch in a tournament full of lightning bolts. The American media, which at first looked at him as an international curiosity, began to recognize his impact. ESPN and the local Philadelphia press mentioned him as one of the best defensive point guards in the country. He was selected All-Atlantic 10 several times and finished his college career with more than 500 assists and nearly 250 steals, numbers that placed him among the historical leaders of the program. John Chaney, his coach, once said that Pepe was the smartest player I ever coached, and that coming from a man who coached for more than 3 decades was a monumental compliment. Temple made consecutive national tournament appearances, and every time the team appeared on television, the camera found the Argentine with his fixed gaze, active hands, and that strange calm of someone who already knows how the play will end. In an environment built on ego, Pepe was pure logic. While others chased applause, he chased the perfect passing angle. While others talked about talent, he talked about reading. That difference turned him into a cult figure. When he graduated, he left Temple with more than numbers, he left a mindset. His time in the NCAA was a demonstration that intelligence can be a form of dominance, that the mind, when trained like a muscle, can even defeat physicality. And although no one knew it at the time, that cerebral style, that elegant defense, that obsessive mind would be the key that opened the tallest door of all. In the year 2000, Pepe Sánchez was at the top of college basketball. But his story wouldn't end with a diploma hanging on the wall. As soon as he left Temple, he decided to take one step further, to a place no Argentine had ever reached. The NBA was another planet, inaccessible, closed, reserved for the chosen ones. And yet the skinny kid from Bahia Blanca was about to step on it. The Philadelphia 76ers signed him as a backup point guard for the 2000 to 2001 season. On paper, it was a minimal bet, but in reality, it was historic. The first Argentine to officially be part of an NBA roster. Shortly afterward, Ruben Wojciechowski would debut, but Pepe did it just before becoming the absolute pioneer. Suddenly, he found himself in a locker room that looked like it came out of a video game. Allen Iverson, Dikembe Mutombo, Aaron McKee, names he had only seen in magazines. The Sixers were one of the best teams in the league, and Pepe arrived from college basketball without sponsors, without marketing, and with English still fragile. But what he brought was something else. Understanding of the game, calm, and brains. He officially debuted on November 5th, 2000 against the New York Knicks. It was only a few minutes on the court, but for Argentina, it was a revolution. An Argentine had stepped onto an NBA court for the first time ever. From a sporting standpoint, his role was secondary, but the symbolic weight was enormous. In an era without social media, without YouTube, and with scarce broadcasts, seeing him share the court with Iverson, Kobe, or Shake was something unimaginable. His debut didn't change the statistics, but it changed history. It was the moment when Argentina stopped seeing the NBA as an impossible dream and began to see it as a door that could be crossed. Pepe didn't change the league, but he changed the way we looked at basketball. He opened a door that seemed locked shut. Suddenly, the dream was no longer a delusion. It wasn't the beginning of a career, it was the beginning of an idea. From him on, the NBA stopped being a myth for Argentines. The door remained ajar, and what came next would change everything. Years later, he summarized it with perfect clarity. I was the first, but not the best. I was the one who opened the door so the best could walk through. And with that door open, nothing was ever the same again. When Pepe Sánchez debuted in the NBA, Argentina literally went crazy. It was the year 2000. There were no streams, no instant highlights, no social media. Watching an NBA game was an odyssey that depended on cable TV, scheduling, and luck. And suddenly, an Argentine was there. The whole country turned into a basketball news desk. Newspapers followed his every step as if it were a space mission. Clarín, Olé, La Nación all had a correspondent or a dedicated section reporting what the Argentine had done in Philadelphia. The articles were meticulously detailed to the point of absurdity. He entered the game with 2 minutes left, lost a ball, but then made an assist. That was published as national news, not because the statistic mattered, but because it was a symbol. Radio joined the phenomenon too. Morning sports programs mentioned him between soccer results and international politics. Commentators read the overnight reports and repeated with a mix of pride and disbelief, Sánchez played an Argentine in the NBA. And even if it was only seconds, they announced it with the same emphasis as a goal in a final. The whole country celebrated every small appearance. Families gathered around the TV to see if he would go in, if he would wave, if the American commentator would mention him. It was the pre-streaming era where imagination filled the gaps. National pride was built from headlines and three-line summaries. Pepe wasn't a media star, but his mere presence on that global stage was an event. In a country where basketball still lived in soccer's shadow, he became, for a moment, a silent hero. Every minute he played was worth gold because it represented something bigger, the confirmation that Argentina was no longer watching the NBA from the stands. And although his appearances in Philadelphia were fleeting, in Buenos Aires they lasted all day. In every bar, every club, every gym, someone said the same thing. Did you see Pepe played? That phrase became part of our sports soundtrack. It was the echo of a dream fulfilled, a small miracle told with an Argentine accent. The 2000 to 2001 season of the Philadelphia 76ers was one of the most intense in the franchise's recent history. Allen Iverson was at his peak, on his way to becoming the league MVP, with an electric, chaotic playing style that was absolutely opposite to that of Pepe Sánchez. Those Sixers were pure adrenaline, speed, improvisation, showmanship. Iverson represented everything the NBA loved. Pepe represented everything the NBA ignored. While the team advanced toward the finals, he quietly lived the contrast. From the bench, he watched Iverson break ankles and Mutombo block impossible shots while he tried to find his place in a structure that didn't speak his language. And not only literally, the NBA was a spectacle and Pepe was a strategist, a player designed for chess, not for the circus. His time with the Sixers was brief, barely 5 official games, a handful of rotation minutes, and one certainty. The system wasn't built for someone like him. In a league that rewarded athleticism, speed, and highlights, his strengths, game reading, intelligence, tactical defense, were invisible to the cameras. Numbers couldn't measure his value. After Philadelphia, he had short stints with the Detroit Pistons and the Golden State Warriors, trying to earn a place in a context that increasingly closed its doors on him. Coaches respected him, teammates valued him, but the system was ruthless. If you didn't produce points or spectacle, you didn't exist. And yet the most fascinating thing is that he didn't break. He didn't sink into frustration or become an exile from the American dream. He understood it with the same calm with which he read a pick and roll. He knew he was in the right place, but at the wrong time. Pepe wasn't a player of flashes. He was a player of fundamentals. In a world that measured talent in inches and highlights, he measured success in correct decisions. And that difference, which had made him special at Temple, condemned him to anonymity in the NBA. While Iverson took over covers and collected awards, Pepe faded quietly into the margins with the same discretion with which he had arrived. But his story wasn't one of failure. It was one of context. Because if his time in the league proved anything, it's that sometimes talent isn't measured by what you see, but by what you understand. And when the noise of the NBA became too much, he did what he always did. He thought about his next move. Destiny awaited him on another continent. While in Europe his game was sharpening like a clockwork mechanism, something unrepeatable was taking shape in Argentina. A generation that would change the history of national sports forever. And when the moment arrived, Pepe Sánchez was not only part of that group, he was the mind that sustained it. In 2002, at the World Cup in Indianapolis, the world saw for the first time what the Argentines were capable of. That tournament was the turning point. Ruben Mañano's team defeated the United States on their own soil with NBA professionals. No one had ever done it before. On that cosmic night, while Ginóbili soared and Oberto gave everything he had, Pepe pulled the strings. He was the starting point guard on that historic team, the one who controlled the tempo, the one who read the defensive traps, the one who organized the system so the others could shine. His leadership wasn't measured in points, it was measured in decisions. While everyone celebrated Manu's talent or Nocioni's grit, Pepe represented something different, order within chaos. He was the one who called for calm when the game got emotional, the one who saw spaces before they existed, represented, the one who made everything flow. 2 years later, at the 2004 Olympic Games in Athens, the world confirmed what Indianapolis had hinted. Argentina won the gold medal and established itself as a world power. In that team full of stars, Pepe was the starting point guard in the semifinal against the United States, the same semifinal many consider the most important game in the history of Argentine basketball. He played injured with his ankle on the edge, but he delivered a lesson in poise. His defense on the American point guards, his ability to move the ball to absorb pressure were decisive for the team's path to gold. Magnano once described him as the guy who always knows what to do, even when no one else does. That was his role. He didn't need to be the protagonist, he needed the team to function. And it did. Pepe was part of the golden generation from its foundations, not only because of how he played, but because of what he represented. His influence went beyond the court. He was the one who talked tactics in the locker rooms, the one who discussed strategies at lunch, the one who analyzed opponents with surgical obsession. He was the brain of the system. When Argentina stood on the podium in Athens, the gold reflected 1,000 stories. Some shone brighter, others were told less often. Pepe's was one of those, the story of the guy who didn't need the spotlight to be indispensable, because while the world watched the stars, he was behind the curtain holding the strings. And that was perhaps his greatest achievement, proving that intelligence, serenity, and reading of the game can be worth as much as a buzzer-beating three-pointer. When many already considered him retired, Pepe Sánchez surprised everyone once again. In 2013, after more than a decade in Europe, he returned to Bahia Blanca, but not to go on a farewell tour, nor to hang up his shoes at home. He came back with a much more ambitious idea, to create a project that would change the way basketball was understood in Argentina. That's how Bahia Basket was born. It wasn't a traditional club, it was a kind of sports laboratory, a space where technology, psychology, education, and basketball blended together. Pepe envisioned it as a school more than a team, a place to shape people, not just players. When the project was presented, many thought it was madness. In a country where most clubs survived with the bare minimum, he proposed a professional structure with analysis cameras, nutrition departments, cognitive-focused training, mindfulness sessions, and personalized work for each player. He wanted to replicate the best of the European model, but with an Argentine identity. And the most incredible part was that he returned to playing himself. At 36, after having retired, he put the jersey back on to guide the younger players from the inside, not as a decorative figure, but as an example. In the National League, on courts he had known since childhood, Pepe played, directed, corrected, and at the same time built a new model of professionalism. Bahia Basket became a reference in the region, not because of titles, which were never his obsession, but because of its philosophy. Players lived together, studied, worked on personal projects, and developed with an integral vision of the sport. "I don't want to produce athletes," Pepe said. "I want to form people who understand what they do on and off the court." The project grew until it became We Basket, an even more educational evolution where Pepe deepened the focus on human development. For him, basketball was an excuse to teach values, collaboration, patience, strategic thinking. This second debut was different from the first. In the NBA, he had sought to open a door. In Bahia, he sought to leave it open. He was no longer the player trying to prove he could compete with the best, but the teacher who wanted to show others how to get there. And the most powerful part of his return was this: understanding that his story didn't end with a final whistle, it merely changed form. Because in Bahia Basket, Pepe wasn't looking for glory, he was looking for meaning. History tends to remember those who shine, not those who think. And perhaps that's why the name of Pepe Sánchez doesn't appear so often when speaking of the greats of Argentine basketball. His career wasn't a succession of highlights or headlines. He wasn't the cover hero, he was the architect of the system. His impact lies on another plane, quieter, deeper, in every point guard who learned to read the game before looking at the rim, in every coach who prioritizes decision-making over statistics, in every kid who understands that talent without brains isn't enough. Pepe changed the way Argentine basketball thinks, even among those who never saw him play. He was the first to show that one could reach the NBA without being a physical beast. The first to teach that intelligence can also be a form of rebellion, that understanding the game can be as revolutionary as dominating it. And that idea that thinking is also competing became the foundation of an entire later generation. When you look at the names that came afterward, Prigioni, Campazzo, La Provitola, there is a common pattern: the mind above the body, reading above speed. All of them in some way, are heirs to the school Pepe helped build. A school that values the mind as much as skill. He never needed to say it. His legacy spread the way powerful ideas do, quietly but relentlessly. And although for many he was only the first one to arrive, for those who understand the game, he was much more. He was the one who showed the way, because there are pioneers remembered for their trophies and others remembered for the doors they opened. Pepe Sánchez belongs to that second category. His name may not be carved in marble, but his way of seeing basketball is carved into everyone who came after him. Argentine basketball has had many heroes, many legends, many nights that made us feel invincible, but before all of them, there was a single spark. A guy who dared to knock on a door that didn't exist and who, by doing so, created a path. Pepe Sánchez wasn't the most famous, nor the most media covered, nor the most celebrated, but he was the first. And being the first is never easy. It means making mistakes without an example, moving forward without a map, stumbling without knowing if anyone will come after you. In Philadelphia, a temple with the national team in Bahia, every stage of his life was a different way of teaching the same thing. That talent without a mind doesn't last, and that thinking can also be a form of courage, because thinking differently in a world that rewards the immediate is also an act of rebellion. Today, his name may sound distant to many, but every time an Argentine point guard lifts his head before shooting, every time a coach talks about reading, rhythm, patience, he is there. In that decision, in that second, in that idea. Pepe didn't just open the door to the NBA, he opened a way of seeing the game and of understanding that limits, the real limits, aren't in the body, but in the mind, and that's why his story doesn't end with a number or a medal. It ends with a question, one that is still floating in the air every time a kid picks up a ball and dares to dream bigger. How far can you go if you dare to think the game? Drop your thoughts in the comment section. This was Hoop Secrets, and I'll see you next time.